Were you like me in the early 90s? You grew up on the hit animated series Captain Planet?
I am Captain Planet.
Did you dream of becoming a Planeteer to do your part and save the planet as well? I can't even say that with a straight face. Did you have Captain Planet sheets? Maybe even a poster? If you said yes to any of those, I'm about to show you a game that has nothing to do with Captain Planet. In Daybreak, you are similar to the Planeteers, a group of nations combining your powers together to reduce the global carbon footprint to a point of drawdown. Is it drawdown? Yes, drawdown. If you've already watched the 20 or so YouTube videos out that are largely positive and you still aren't convinced to play this game, I've got 5 reasons for you to do so. Before that, I'm going to give this the 3-minute board game treatment. Well, he actually already did a video, so I'm going to one-up him. I'm going to do the 2-minute board game treatment on how this game actually plays. So like I mentioned, the theme is you are a disgusting, dirty country, flush with carbon emissions in the form of producing dirty energy and all these other kind of carbon producers. Each one of the countries are lightly asymmetric. You have different starting cards, different board setup, but in general, the idea of the game is the same for all players. You have 5 starting cards that start on the top of your board. You then draw 5 cards and play those cards. You can play those cards in 3 different ways. You either place them in front, place them in back, or spin them to activate. There's a few side cases, but for the most part, 98% of the game, you're doing those 3 things with your 5 cards. Many of the cards that you play interact with the symbols at the top of the card. These symbols will augment for the better many of the actions that are listed on these cards, so the more that you place behind gives you more symbols to draw from and will make your actions that much more powerful. You can also change those actions at any time and just play a card in front. And if you play a card in front, that action is now changed completely. However, before you do so, you can still activate the card underneath it and then play a card on top of it, making it more powerful. The other reason to use those cards is to spend them. Many of these actions have card costs associated with them, so you're looking at your hand trying to figure out what you want to play in front, which actions that you currently have you want to augment and play the cards in the back, as well as what you need to hold in your hand in order to activate all of the cards in front of you. Why are you doing all of this? Well, your board starts with all of this brown nastiness that emits carbon at the end of each round. You're basically trying to get rid of them. You're trying to produce more clean energy and get rid of dirty energy. You're trying to get rid of all of the different emission sources. And once you do enough of that, you will finally produce an amount of carbon that your environment has more than enough ability to absorb. And that is when you get to drawdown. And as long as you survive the last round full of planetary effect dies and crisis cards, you win the game. Speaking of those negative effects, that is kind of the friction in the game. The friction in the game is cascading failure. On the right side of this main board, there is a thermometer, and the more emissions you produce, the faster that thermometer rises, or the temperature rises on the planet. And the more it rises, the more of these negative effects you have to deal with each and every round in the form of rolling planetary effect dice that then increase these tracks on the main board. They have a bevy of negative effects that are going to hamper you or destroy your progress. On top of that, there's crisis cards that come out each and every round. You only have visibility to one at a time. The rest are secret. And the higher that thermometer goes up, the more of those you have to deal with. You have a little bit of an advantage in a global project. At the beginning of each round, you and the other countries decide on what global project to work on. If it is successful, it'll give you a lasting power for the rest of the game, essentially. Back to your player board, you mitigate all of this with the cards that you are building up and making more and more powerful, and trying to get rid of all of those emission sources. You also add resilience tokens in 3 different categories, which are social, ecological, and infrastructure. Many of the crisis cards interact with those tokens. Well, they'll take them away, but also you can reduce the effects of crisis by having the resilience in your community. And lastly, there's all these slots for community and crisis tokens. You can get them through crisis cards or not being able to meet the growing demand of energy on your player board. Those are bad because they reduce the number of cards that you can draw. They'll also eventually lose you the game. I have no idea if that took 2 minutes. We'll see after the edit, but I tried my best to give you the general idea, which is you're building an engine with cards that you're increasing in power over time. You are adding resilience to your community to deal with these crisis cards and the planetary effect dice, all in the pursuit of reducing the carbon that you're emitting to a number that's manageable with the Earth's resources in oceans, forests, and direct air capture. Okay, so that's the game. Why do you need to play it? And this is 5 reasons why you should be playing Daybreak. Reason number 1, I already alluded to this. You love Captain Planet, you want to save the world, and you want to learn how to do so. So the game in general is really thematic and deals with a lot of interconnecting mechanisms around climate change and essentially how to reduce carbon emissions. On top of that, the game goes the extra mile, and each one of these cards has a QR code that, first of all, just for rules and interpretation on cards, I think every game should have something like this. This has been great. The idea of having a QR code I can scan at any time to understand what this card does a little more in detail is huge. I absolutely love that. But on top of that, every single one of these QR codes goes to a unique URL that has the card's interpretation. On top of that, every single article has education and information relating to what the card is talking about. And then if that's not enough, there's also links on further education. And then there's action items on how you can make a difference in the particular issue the card is dealing with. I mean, that honestly almost sticks out more than anything in this game. Is just the attention to detail and the time in which it would have taken to create these individual articles. It's pretty astounding. And now, like in Captain Planet, the Planeteer's giving you tips. These cards are giving you tips now.
Looks terrible. Nothing will grow here.
I know, Kwame. Many forms of mining destroy the land.
But there's something you can do that will stop more of our beautiful Earth from looking like this.
Instead of throwing away your aluminum cans, foil, and other reusable metals, take them to a collection center. Be a Planeteer. Recycle. We do.
The power is yours!
Reason number 2, you and a couple of buds want to play a crunchy puzzle together. This is very much a co-op game, and the thing that's helping this really come to life from a co-op perspective is simultaneous action. You and every other player or country have the 5 cards and are playing them at the same exact time. This does lead to some multiplayer solitaire componentry, but it's allowing you to play this really crunchy game together that, if you didn't have the simultaneous nature, would really take a long time. On top of that, there's the global project cards that each and every phase you are talking together and discussing why you need to do one project or the other, because you draw 2 and have to pick one. And then it takes action from everyone around the table to actually make each of those global projects active by discarding the right type of card for the given project. Also, at the beginning of each round, you're revealing a crisis card. I think the one crisis card that is revealed really brings this together as a co-op game, because you're also now looking at an impending or predicted or forecasted threat that is going to take action from you collectively. And then everyone discuss if they have the right cards in order to take care of it, or they have the right resilience tokens on their board. You can work together to help mitigate that disaster for yourself or for everyone else. In fact, some of your local project cards that you'll play on your tableau will allow you to pass cards to one another, and that just reinforces this ability to be able to work together to help each other mitigate the crisis disaster that's about to happen at the end of the round.
Let our powers combine. Earth. Fire.
Wind. Water.
All right, reason number 3, you like the idea of a new world order, one global government, and you want to do this all on your own. The solo mode is spectacular. I really enjoyed the solo mode. In fact, the solo mode for me actually takes longer than the multiplayer co-op. First of all, it's a seamless integration. It's just you play with a solo setup instead of a particular government setup. The scaling kind of happens automatically, essentially, and it just works. There's not really extra rules overhead. It's just easy to get into. But for me, it was much more AP prone at 1 because now I had the freedom to really think through every single turn. And you eventually get in this game to a point where there's a lot of decisions and a lot of interacting mechanisms that are possibilities. And in the solo game, you can really think through that puzzle, take your time, and just enjoy the gameplay. Reason number 4, you like the idea of impending doom.
Your polluting powers combined, I am Captain Pollution!
This is very much an engine builder. However, the difference between this and all of the other big shots out there that deal with engine building is there's this cascading failure. The crisis cards add to that. The temperature rising gives you more crisis cards and more planetary effect die. The more times you roll that planetary effect die, the more often you're going to get that negative effect triggered. The pressure to reduce your carbon emissions is really immense. And if you don't do so, the game completely spirals out of control really, really quickly. Think Pandemic, hence this comes from the creators of Pandemic. If you like Pandemic and you like this theme, you'll probably like this game. And now for number 5, this is probably my favorite part of the game. Get rid of the theme, get rid of the cascading failure, all of that stuff. It is simply the card play. I really enjoyed the puzzle here. There's a ton of these local project cards, which are the cards you're playing each and every turn. They have a lot of different effects. Some are very specific, trying to get rid of the certain types of emissions. There's cards that give you more card draw, which always feels really, really good. There's cards that have this compounding effect that if you have enough of the symbols, completely creates this overpowered scenario or synergy. And then the idea of being able to activate cards, play cards on top of it, and then activate it again is a really interesting puzzle. There's not a ton of rounds to this game, so you're starting to do the math as you get into the later rounds, and you're getting closer to that victory on if you could forego and get rid of the previous ability on the card by playing a new one on top of it. Additionally, there might be a bunch of symbols that are stacked on top of it that synergize with the card you're about to play, so you can activate the first card, play the new card, activate the second card, that all of a sudden can be this complete powerhouse of a card late in the game, and you weren't really building for it. You happen to get it in your hand and you played it. You are at the mercy of the luck of the draw, but there's cards to mitigate that. There's cards that allow you to discard a card, draw a bunch of cards, and then keep one. So you can really dig through this pile and see some really great cards that are going to work well with the strategy you're trying to employ. The card play is so fun that last night my wife and I were playing a 2-player game, and we got our missions to the perfect level where every single carbon was taken care of by a component or an earth component that's sitting out there on the map. We were checking the rules, like, did we win if we perfectly distributed the carbon through all those components, or do these earth components need to have at least one more capacity to take in a new carbon? It turns out it is the latter, and we were actually excited about it because we got to play the card game again. We got to go through one more round, and that's what my wife was saying. It's like, I actually don't want to win right now. I want to keep playing on what she was building. There is this sense of progression and accomplishment that I think is a hallmark in so many different games. It reminds me of things like Wingspan. It reminds me of things like Earth, and it actually reminds me a little bit of Furnace. You have that engine building component, but there's also a big emphasis on order of operations, because then you might want to play another card in your hand on top of the card that you just activated. And the game becomes really crunchy because you're also not just looking at your board, you're looking at that global project that I had mentioned, that shared kind of power. There's active cards that allow you to use those powers, but there's also inactive cards that you have to contribute to activate. Do you want to use some of your cards on that? Do you need to use some of your cards to deal with a crisis card that's sitting out there? It's a multi-dimensional problem that also is made even more complicated when you're trying to consider your partner countries. communities and how you can help them. As an example of this really good feeling, crunchy idea, imagine this scenario. I have heat pumps and offshore wind. Heat pumps, I can increase my energy demand to get rid of a building. I can do that each round based upon the number of incentive symbols that are tucked behind this card. Let's take the scenario where I have 4 building emission tokens that I have to get rid of. I come across this heat pump card. Hey, that looks good. I can actually get rid of them times the number of this incentive symbol. If I tuck a bunch of those, I can do all at once. And it's really just one action, or I can just do it once per turn and slowly erode these building symbols, reducing my carbon. However, I have to increase my energy consumption to do so. If you don't make enough energy for your energy consumption, you have to take one of these community in crisis tokens that I had mentioned earlier, which can lose you the game, give you less card draw. They're bad. However, I also happen to have this offshore wind card. I can discard a card and add 2 clean energy per wind symbol. So this card is made even more powerful by me having more of this wind symbol, and I just so happen to have 2 tucked. So I can discard 3 cards and increase my clean energy by 6. I only need to do this a couple times to then make this card completely useless. Then I can stack another card on top of it and make use of that. And why is that important? The more clean energy gives me more energy to deal with the energy demands of my country. I can keep increasing those energy demands to get rid of these building tokens, so on and so forth. That's all great. However, that offshore wind takes a lot of cards. So let's imagine I have this green investment bank. If I have 2 to 3 of these innovation symbols in this column of cards, I can draw an extra card at the beginning of the turn. If I have 4 to 5, I can draw 2. If I have 6, I can draw 3. And then I'm drawing 8 cards per turn. I have more than enough to activate this offshore wind, so on and so forth. That's when this game gets fun, when you start to find these cards that interact with each other. You're also doing the math on how long you even need to use them. If you make them super powerful, but then you've taken up all of your clean energy slots and you don't need to produce clean energy anymore, that doesn't matter because you can play another card on top of it. You might come across another card that needs the same symbols that are sitting in that column that all of a sudden is that mega card. Those are the moments in this game that are absolutely awesome. And those are the moments that keep me coming back. Those are the moments that during our play last night made us not want to win because we wanted to play another round just to play this puzzle again. The card play is a blast. It's just good. And there's countless examples of those synergies sitting in this big deck of cards. And that's it. That's Daybreak. That's why you should play it. It is really a spectacular game. At the end of the day, I think it's a wonderful solo puzzle if you just want to sit down and play a puzzle. The added complexity of the global projects and the global crisis, having to work together to get these great powers and mitigate all of these different crises, make it a great co-op game as well. The simultaneous play ensures that this game won't lag whatsoever in the co-op scenario, which often happens in games like this. The theme is charming, the cards are thoughtful, the QR codes, it all just adds up to a great game for me in the end. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Maybe like and subscribe, I don't know, but either way, thank you for being here and have a great week.